Okay, awesome. We'll get started now. So hi everyone, welcome to the Burst Academics MCAT workshop for this semester. I'm really happy to see all of you here. So just to do a few housekeeping rules before I get Sean rolling, just to remind you guys, no homework or distractions during this hour, and the sign in for this workshop will be at the very end of this conference call, so be on the lookout for that. And bring all your questions out today. Sean is or has taken the MCAT before, so he has a lot of resources and tips and tricks for you guys. So feel free to put them in the chat or just talk out loud and unmute yourself at the end. And so we'll be recording the session and I'll try to stop it before questions if there are any personal questions out there. And yeah, so I'll hand it over to you, Sean.
Awesome, thanks Joyce. So hopefully everyone can hear me fine and see the screen properly. So my name is Sean, I'm a senior biology major here at Baylor University, and we're gonna tackle the MCAT today. So let's get started. But first, quick icebreaker. So real quick in the chat or out loud, what's your favorite superpower? And maybe offer a reason why. Telepathy. Tony Stark's creative mind. Wow. Oh, Haley and Jessica can talk to each other with telepathy, right? Teleportation. Yeah, Tuba, Alex, that's my favorite too. Spider-Man, is that a superpower? I guess his powers are a power. Super speed. Nice. I like it. I like it. Very cool. That way I can assemble my own team of Avengers one day. Okay, so hopping into getting started with the MCAT, we're basically going to cover a few different sections today. Usually this is a series of workshops that's spread over like 4 or 5 different ones. So we're just going to give you a condensed version today, try to get everything in for you. So we're going to cover first, like, what is the MCAT, kind of the basics of what it is, why you need to take it, and how to get started. Second, we're going to look at how to prepare for the MCAT with different tips, tricks, and study strategies. After that, we're going to look at a few resources, both free and paid resources that are going to be great for your content review and your practice. And then we'll kind of talk about what happens after the MCAT, like the next steps after you've taken it. So the first thing we're going to hop into is, what is the MCAT? And first, a quote from Albert Einstein: "Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think." So one of the things about the MCAT is that it's super critical that you know how to think on your feet and not just memorize a bunch of the biochemistry or the chemistry and things like that. So definitely be thinking about how to approach the MCAT with a more critical analysis approach. And so the basics of the MCAT, it stands for the Medical College Admission Test. So if you're interested in an MD, a DO route in the future, then this is the test you'll have to take. It's administered by the Association of American Medical Colleges, or the AAMC, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. The MCAT, it is a 7.5-hour exam. Recently, due to COVID, it was shortened to about 5-6 hours. But starting in January, so I'm assuming when y'all are going to take it.
Even the MCAT got shortened due to COVID. Like, instead of taking a 7-hour test.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 8 hours, so.
It was 5 hours.
2 hours out!
All right, so yeah, it was now changed back to 7.5 hours, so be ready for that. It is taken on a computer. You will be going to a location, like a testing site, to take the exam. And then as you're taking it, you'll go through 4 different sections, which we'll talk about in a bit. Each one of those is scored from 118 to 132. And then the total of those 4 sections will be from 472 to 528. Super arbitrary number, but that's what we got to work with. So what's covered on the MCAT? So in general, these are classes you can take to be sure that you'll hit basically 95-ish% of what's going to be on the MCAT. So 2 semesters of Gen Chem, 2 semesters of organic chemistry, 2 semesters of physics, 2 semesters of intro biology. Some ones that are nice to have, they're really useful and you'll get a lot out of them. There's genetics and human physiology, but they're not required or anything like that. Biochemistry is super big on the MCAT, so make sure you've taken that. And then psychology and sociology. Of course, these are just recommendations. You can always self-study these courses before your exam. For example, if say you haven't taken physics 2 yet, that one you can kind of self-study. Same with maybe like psychology or sociology. Self-study and you can still get through the exam. On the right, you'll kind of see how it's scored. You'll see at the top of the curve, it says 500. So the way it is the exam is scaled on a curve. And so the middle 50% of people will be scoring a 500. And so if you're saying scoring at the 528 range, you're in like the 99th percentile. If you're in the 472 range, that's around like the 0th percentile. And kind of a reiteration of that, you can kind of see how the percentiles look with the scoring ranges. And so you'll notice like in the higher ranges, you can get even like a 520 and still be in the 98th, 99th percentile. And then on the right, this is kind of what it's going to look like once you finish your exam, and you can see how you scored in each of the different sections and how you compare to others with a percentile rank. For those of you wanting to take it in the spring this year, registration is opening up soon. So you can go onto the AAMC website and register for the MCAT. On November 2nd, you can begin doing pre-registration, which is basically just inputting all of your information, your name, date of birth, email, all that demographic stuff. But you won't be able to pay for or choose your exam date at that time. That happens on November 10th. And so, put that in your calendars if you're interested in the spring dates, especially for January and March. And then if you're asking when should I take the MCAT, the best answer, kind of a cop-out, is when you're ready for it. Some people take it as early as their sophomore year. Some people take it in their senior years if they're taking like a gap year. The majority of people take it if they're on a traditional path in the spring of their junior year. And so that's anywhere from January to about May. And like I said, some people take it a little earlier, some people take it a little later with varying results. And so one thing to keep in mind is that medical school applications open up in May if you're applying to Texas schools using the TMD-SAS system. And they open up in June if you're using the MCAS application system for most of the schools in the US and Baylor College of Medicine. And so, planning to have your MCAT score taken before those applications open gives you a complete application, lets you apply earlier, get interviews back earlier, and just highly increase your chances of getting accepted to medical school. Next thing here, basically that's a lot of information, but you might be wondering, how do I get started? And so real quick, we're going to take a look at some different tips for MCAT preparation. So like I mentioned, the average score on the MCAT is 500 just because that's how the bell curve works. But the average applicant for the TMD-SAS, again, that's the Texas application system for most of the Texas medical schools. The average applicant has a score of 505, but the average matriculant, that means whoever gets into medical school, has a score of 510. And for MCAS, those scores have been increasing year by year. And so expect the scores to be even higher this upcoming year. And if you're maybe a freshman or sophomore, even higher by the time you're taking the exam. You want to be able to select a target score for yourself so that you know kind of what you're aiming for, so that you can gauge where you're at and where your progress towards your goal. And so how do you select the target score? You want to take a diagnostic exam early on to see what you already know and what you need to improve. I recommend doing this even before you've started any content review. So just taking it cold. I took mine, I scored in like the 20th 30 percentile, but I was able to increase that over the course of my studying. And so just knowing where you're at gives you a really good place to start. You also want to research the medical schools you'd like to attend and find out what MCAT scores are in their kind of range. One of the things that is really common is commonly used is the MSAR, and it's called the Medical School Admissions Requirement. I think I'll have a slide about it in a second, but essentially what it has is the percentile ranges of the MCAT scores for each school. And then your target score should be attainable, and so something you can see yourself getting as you're progressing through your study. So you'll be taking lots of different practice exams throughout, and you'll kind of start to see where you'll probably score. But I'll talk about that a little later on as well. And then make sure you're practicing to reinforce the progress as well. So this is a look at the medical school admissions requirement. This is made by the AAMC, so it is the most official and most legitimate source you're going to get for different scores or GPAs and things like that. And so you can look here for most of the schools in the US. So for example, if you're interested in Baylor College of Medicine, you'll get all sorts of things like what kind of degrees they have, their deadlines, how big their class is, and importantly for the MCAT, what their median score is. So if you're scoring maybe like a 505, the likelihood of getting into BCM realistically aren't super high. But if you're soaring in that range, then there's a good chance, that you're in the radar for them. So definitely take a look at that. It does cost a little bit, maybe like $10 to $20 for it, if I recall correctly, but it's definitely worth it as you're trying to hone down your list of medical schools that you're interested in and preparing for what score you want. So this is a general guideline that most of the test prep companies, most of the people who've done well on the MCAT, they kind of recommend that you have at least 300 plus hours of active MCAT studying to be super ready for the MCAT, to be at a really good place to score in the highest percentiles. So however you split this up is up to you, but 300 is usually a good starting point. And so what could that study schedule kind of look like? If you do maybe 20 hours a week, kind of divide that into 300, see how many weeks you'll need to prepare. If you can study more hours a week, kind of tone down the amount of time that you're studying for, and just accommodate based on your schedule. Another option is you can study a few hours per day, about 6 days a week. One of the things I always recommend in any study schedule is a rest day. So one day of purely no MCAT. And so that's going to help you get rejuvenated and feel good about the constant studying. People usually recommend at least 3 months of MCAT studying. Usually more than that, like 5, 6 months can usually burn you out, and that can have negative returns. So if you know anything about like Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, you'll start forgetting all of that information that you have been studying so hard to retain. And so try not to study for too long for the MCAT. And then know that different study schedules work for everybody. If you tend to take a little longer, then plan that into your schedule. If maybe you've done super well in all of your classes and you've retained all of that material to where you can basically you have photographic memory of that material, maybe you need a little less time and you can plan for that accordingly. So just kind of think about where you're at and where you want to be. Here's an example of what my MCAT schedule looks like. At the start of my studying, of course, I didn't always follow this every single day, but I try my best to kind of stick with it. You'll kind of notice one day there's a full length exam here. You want to take at least one MCAT practice exam every week, especially as you get closer to your MCAT date. One of the things that I did, this was my starting schedule, so it wasn't perfect. I did review that same day, but I'd recommend just leaving that whole day off. You took a 7-hour test. There's no reason to kill yourself and review it on the same day. The second thing that I would have changed is the test review. I have it here and here. That's only about 4-ish hours. One of the things about the MCAT reviewing is that it's basically the most important part of your preparation. So you've taken the full 7-hour exam. Now you're probably going to need at least the same amount of time to go through each question and see kind of what you knew, what you need to learn, the question types that you've been missing, and how to improve from there. And so again, reviewing your MCAT practice exams is super critical to seeing score improvements. Other than that, you'll notice that I have split up like different things. So reading, videos. I had a class that I was taking for the MCAT. I'll talk a little bit more about classes later on. And so I scheduled that, scheduled making sure to eat, work out. I did yoga for the first time during this time period. And so that was kind of fun. But then you'll notice I also, alongside like different content review from videos and reading, I have things like the question bank and other practice like that. So you definitely want to intersperse content review with practice. And so that's also what's going to help you see improvements rather than just kind of plateauing as you just constantly do content. And then like you see on Saturday, or this last day over here, I had a full day of no MCAT at all. That kind of just gets your mind off of things because studying for the MCAT is like a marathon. You don't want to burn yourself out. You want to stay in the race. And so as you're doing the MCAT preparation, I kind of hinted there's only 2 parts really. That's content review, practice, and then of course, self-care. Content review is doing things like going through review books, looking at online videos, whether that's Khan Academy or videos from one of your prep courses, if you take those, any notes you have or flashcards. And then practice is things like the end of chapter questions that review books will have, question packs you can find online, and practice exams. And then of course, self-care is super important. You do not want to burn out and feel really down about the whole MCAT preparation process. The more you can stay with it, the better results you're going to see. And so the key really is finding the right balance between all of these things. And then we'll talk about the different resources coming right up. But again, I'm going to harp on this time after time. Practice makes perfect. So the practice exams and reviewing them is going to be the most important part of the whole thing. You get to gauge your strengths and weaknesses. You get to practice your timing with the exam. It's a 7.5-hour exam, and I don't know about you, but I hadn't taken a test that long before. And so these practice exams really help you kind of gauge how to manage that time. It also gets you comfortable with the types of questions you'll see. If you notice on the right, all of the questions in the MCAT, or a majority of them, are passage-based. And so you'll be reading long, complicated scientific passages and then answering questions about them. There are a few discrete questions, is what they call it, the ones that are not related to a passage, but the majority of them are passage-based. But other than that, you'll really solidify the content. So as you practice material, you take the test, you get it wrong, you learn from it, and then you see it again next time. Hopefully you don't get it wrong, and you'll improve from there. If you get it wrong again, then that's just more reinforcement of, hey, I need to, learn this material, make sure I don't get it wrong the next time. And so you might be asking how to take a practice exam. And so you want to make sure you're emulating testing conditions. So the MCAT is at a testing site. It's going to be quiet. It's going to be really cold sometimes. So make sure you accommodate for that. But you want to basically find a quiet spot where you can take a whole 7.5-hour length test. You want to time your breaks appropriately. Don't give yourself an hour break when the MCAT only gives you 30 minutes. You want to make sure that you are getting the best results from your practice exam so that you can kind of extrapolate that and kind of predict where you're going to be on the real exam. And then don't do anything you won't do on test day. So if you make yourself like a huge lunch, you won't be able to do that on the actual test day. And so don't kind of mess around with those variables as you're practicing. When do you want to take practice exams? Like I mentioned, do some content review, then do practice at the same time. You want to make sure you're interspersing both of them so that you're not just doing a content review for 5 months and then doing practice only the last week. That just wouldn't be beneficial to you. And try to take at least one once a week. especially as you're getting closer. So maybe the last month or two, especially, make sure you're taking one once a week. And then after that, after you've taken the practice exam, take the rest of the day off like I recommended. You know, get recharged, do something fun, go out with your friends. Or I guess not during COVID, but do something you enjoy. And then after that, I recommend even taking the whole next day to review that exam and create what I call a why I missed it sheet. You'll see that Kaplan calls it this as well. I'll talk about it on the next slide, I believe. And so when you're reviewing your MCAT practice exam, make sure that you are motivated. It's really easy to just take the MCAT, say that, oh, okay, I got this score, move on to the next content area that you need. But you definitely want to stick with it. Know that this practice exam, reviewing it is going to be your best review because you'll see the information that you're trying to learn in context. And so that really helps you solidify the info. And so go through every question, make sure you understand why you picked the answers you did, why it was right, why it was wrong, and things like that. And so when you're reviewing your exam, definitely recommend making a spreadsheet. And it can look something like this, where you have the section. So CP for chemistry, physics, PS for psych soc, that kind of thing. See if you got it correct or not. I think for the spreadsheet, what I did was only put in the ones I got wrong, but I definitely did review the ones I got right as well. And then you have things like why I missed it. You have an explanation of that question. And so this, again, forces you to either know the information or go back and find out the correct information. And then you can have a section of why you'll get it right next time. So kind of what you'll change to make sure you don't get it wrong again. So again, fill in the content gaps, notice the patterns, question types you're getting wrong. Each question on the MCAT has like a category that the AAMC has designated as. And so if you notice that you are missing like comprehension questions, focus on those, or critical analysis questions, focus on those. And then if you want to find answer explanations, there are definitely a lot of resources online that you can use if, say, like the practice exam you're using gives a pretty poor explanation. A lot of different resources like Reddit have really good explanations for these kinds of questions. Basically, any practice exam you take, there's going to be an answer explanation for each question on Reddit. And I'll talk a little bit more about Reddit later and why there are some pros and cons to using that as a resource. And again, I'm going to mention this. Make sure to focus on stress management. Talk to someone who's taking the exam with you. Talk to someone who's already finished taking their exam. Just talk to someone about your experience, and it can really help you kind of stay in it to win it. And make sure you're doing everything like exercising, eating, and sleeping so that, again, you're not burning out. And so as you're taking these practice exams, what do they tell you? So if you're taking third-party exams like Kaplan, Princeton Review, Blueprint, anything like that, those are not always super representative of what you're actually going to be scoring on the real thing. What does really help is what's called the AAMC, official full-length exams. And so there's 4 of them. They're coming out with a new one this year. And then if you're taking it later on, I believe they come out with 1 extra one each year. And so right now there's 4 of them, and they're going to be the best indicator of what you're going to score on your exam. And so if I follow my recommendation of 1 test a week, you'll be taking this the last month of your MCAT preparation. And the average of your 4 AAMC full lengths is typically around what you're going to score for your real thing. And so if you're scoring not nearly where you're wanting to be, maybe consider rescheduling or kind of changing how you study in that last month. And then know that all scores that you do get on the MCAT, like once you've taken the real thing, they stay there on your record forever. And so if you're not scoring where you want to be, there's no reason to take the exam and have that score on your record. And it's not like the SAT or ACT where you can choose which scores you send. The MCAT, all the MCAT scores you've taken are sent to the medical schools. So keep that in mind. And then one thing, tips from Dr. Sanker, he does set a mentality of getting a 512 or better for Texas schools. And this was a recommendation he gave me and a few others last year. And he said that it's likely that 513, 514 is what Texas residents might be wanting to aim for as score averages keep increasing. And so that's a score that you'll be comfortable at. A little lower, you're still able to get into schools and things like that. But 513, 514 is where you'll be comfortable applying to most schools. Again, spend less time on content review. A lot of people spend like 80, 90% of their time on content review, but you really want to make it at least 50-50 where you're practicing the material that you're using. And then of course, take the MCAT, knowing what score you'll get. So like I said, the average of your 4 official full lengths, that's a really good indicator of what you're going to get, give or take a few points. And so real quick, I want to show you some different resources that you can use, both free and paid, that'll really help you out. And so real quick, I'm going to share my screen on a different document. All right, are y'all all able to see this Google document? Okay, awesome. So real quick, these are some resources that me and a few other people who've graduated or who are in my year, we got together and created this. And so it should be pretty up to date for things that you'll need to prepare for the MCAT. One of the first things that I mentioned is the AAMC has lots of different official resources. So these are the best resources you're going to get to know exactly what the MCAT is going to be like, because they are the test makers. And so what they have is a sample full-length exam, as well as full-length exams 1 through 4. And so that's a total of 5 full lengths right there. And so these do cost a little bit of money, but if you don't pay for anything else, these are what you need to invest in and get the practice in for. A few other things that the AAMC has is a question bank and a section bank. And so the section bank is basically a bunch of more practice questions. I believe it's like 200 practice questions you can use for each section. And then question pack, which helps you review things like content as you go through. And so definitely be looking at the AAMC materials as, the best ones that are going to tell you what the MCAT is actually like. Moving on, I talked a lot about practice tests. And so there are actually a few ways to get free practice tests from especially the prep companies. They are wanting to get you to buy their products. And so they usually offer a few different free resources. So Blueprint, formerly called Next Step, if you've heard of that company, they have one free half length. That's a diagnostic exam if you're interested in seeing kind of where you're at. They have one free full length. And then they also have a 7-day trial for like their study plan tool, which is a really good way to kind of set a schedule for yourself of like what you want to study on what day. Princeton Review has one free practice exam. Kaplan has a diagnostic. And then Altius, last time I checked, has a free half length as well. Moving on to like practice questions. UWorld is one of the most popular resources for MCAT questions. They're known to have really good questions and really good explanations. And reading the answer explanations, whether you got the question wrong or right, is going to be where that information is really reinforced. And so I haven't tried it personally, but I know lots of people who have with great success. And so there's a 7-day free trial. And so maybe check that out, see if it works for you. And if so, maybe look to invest in that. Varsity Tutors is another one that has lots of MCAT questions for free. Again, these are more for content rather than practicing like how the exam is formatted. One thing that I recommend for everyone is doing what's called Jack Weston. It's basically free practice daily for the CARS section. So the CARS section is the critical analysis and reading section, I believe. Basically, it's the English section on the MCAT. And for a lot of us, especially as if you're a STEM major, you maybe haven't looked at things in the humanities in a long time. And so what Jack Weston is it basically sends you a free MCAT passage. And so I'm actually just gonna hop onto that website right now to show you. And what they have is MCAT passages for the CAR section that you can practice every single day. And that's the only way really that you're gonna get better at this section. And so you'll notice like they have one for each date, and you can go back if say like you missed a day or you wanna do like 3 in a day or things like that. What it looks like, do y'all see this pop-up right here with the passage on the left? Thumbs up if you see it. Okay, awesome. So this is kind of what the passages would look like on Jack Weston. It'll give you a passage here. It'll be something from the humanities, whether that's philosophy, economics, things like that. And you're gonna have to learn how to kind of analyze, read, and answer these questions. And so you'll have different, you can show like the comments of what other people did on these passages and things like that. Again, the only way to get better at CARS is practice and consistent practice. So Jack Weston is a good way and a free way to really get at that section. All right, jumping back to other resources. Moving on to content review. One of the things here, and I'll share this document with all of you guys who have attended today, and it will be available in an email as well after this. The first thing here is a mile down review document. Mile down is a user who was on Reddit and created lots of good resources for the MCAT. One of those is a review sheet. It's about 90 pages and covers like the basics of the different materials and subjects that you need for the MCAT. Khan Academy is a super good resource. For those of you taking the exam sometime in 2021, you're in luck because I think the Khan Academy MCAT page will still be open. By 2022, they'll be canceling the entire MCAT like resources that they have, and so those won't be accessible. But for those of you testing in 2021, this is a really good resource for content review and a few different practice questions. One other thing they have is a 100-page and a 300-page psych-soc note document, and that basically covers 99% of what you'll need on the MCAT. So if you don't want to buy like a content review book or anything like that, this is super sufficient. One thing a lot of people recommend is what's called Anki. It's basically a Quizlet that's much fancier in terms of like what it can do. So for this program, it uses what's called spaced repetition, and that's really going to help you learn things in a much more efficient way, and so that you're retaining more information. You can watch this video here by Med School Insiders, another great YouTuber for anything med school related. You can watch the YouTube video on how to best use Anki right there. And then know that the desktop version is free, which is really nice. And they also have a mobile app, so you can be doing like flashcards as you're on the go. It's free for Android, but it's 25 bucks for Apple. It's a lot, but it's a good investment if you're studying like on your phone or anything like that. And a few other resources, like a YouTube channel here, good for quite a few different subjects. If you're like an auditory learner, the MCAT podcast could be an option for you. That's more of a auditory experience where you're learning content while you could be doing other things. And then onto the paid resources, like I mentioned, the official AAMC products. These are going to be the creme de la creme of your preparation. Basically, if you want to make sure that you're fully prepared, you need to have these resources. The other ones, all of these, you know, will help you out, but they're not necessarily needed. But these definitely are. And so, again, you can buy the sample and the full-length exams. You can buy the section bank. I guess it has 300 questions. It's usually pretty difficult, but it's definitely good practice. And then the question packs, these were made before the MCAT changed in 2015, but they're still good in terms of like the content that they test. And so these are really good for practicing and really solidifying that content. And then of course the AAMC offers bundles, so that can save you some money as you're buying these things. And then the last thing is test prep companies. And so test prep companies, if you guys don't know already, are usually really expensive. If you notice here, Princeton Review, this first one is already like $3,000. This last one is $1,700. And for a lot of people, that's not something that they can just spend willy-nilly. And so definitely be considering all of these different other resources that are available and that can help you out before you kind of jump in right away into buying a prep course. I personally did do the Kaplan course for me, and this is based off my own experience. I found that the resources and so resources, by that I mean like the online videos they had different lecture videos on the content areas, and they had a section bank, which was basically a bunch of different practice questions, and you can filter it by whatever subject area you're studying. I think those two things were really great, but the actual in-person sessions, like the classes they have, they weren't that valuable, and I don't know if they'd be worth like spending $2,000 again on that. So maybe something like a self-paced course where you get access to like those videos, those section bank questions, that could be a little more worth your money. But again, this is still very expensive. And so be considering all of the free options you have like here and here before you jump and dive right into these test prep companies. And so other ones like Exam Crackers and Berkeley Review are common ones as well, and as well as Blueprint Test Prep. Those are all different courses. And so those are just a few of the resources that y'all can use throughout your MCAT study. And so jumping back onto this here, we're going to take a look at the next steps kind of after you've done all that content review, after you've taken your practice exams, and then finally your real thing. And so after the MCAT, it usually takes about a month to get the scores back. Usually in that time, they're trying to resolve any issues that students had, like if they had to void their exam because people were being disruptive and their whole exam had to be canceled. They're basically throwing out those so that all of the bell curve scoring is accurate. But in the meantime, during that month, go have fun, focus in on the things you missed out on. You go to the beach, learn how to rock climb, things like that. And then as you're waiting for your scores, kind of think about the score that you'll be happy with and what score you think you would maybe retake your exam at if you scored there. And so if say your target score is a 515 and then you're saying that if you score below like a 507, you'll retake. And the way you kind of think about that is what your average score for those last 4 full-length exams, whatever that was or whatever you're scoring near the end of your preparation, that's kind of where you should be scoring on your real thing. So if you see a score drop of like maybe 5, 10 points, that's might not be representative of all the work that you put in. So maybe consider doing a retake. I'll also talk a little about the pros and cons of that. Of course, try not to stress out as you're waiting for your exam scores. You really only have like your full-length averages to kind of give you a prediction of where you score. But other than that, it's really out of your hands. But on the day of your score release, they'll upload those onto the AAMC website sometime before 5 p.m. And so if you're considering retaking an exam, only do so if you think that the score you got wasn't representative of how you've been doing. So if maybe you're scoring like 520, 520, 521, 523, and all of a sudden on your real thing, you get a 510, that might not be exactly what representative of how you were doing before. And so maybe consider retaking. Of course, a 510 is still pretty good, and I probably wouldn't recommend you retake it, but if you're scoring maybe like in the 500 and you're scoring like 515 on average, then that might be a good time to take it, retake. And then of course, only retake if you're really set on improving your score. Like I mentioned, every single MCAT you take, that score is permanently on your record. And so don't retake it and then not study for it, or not really hone in on what areas you're weak at. Really consider how you're going to do better for the next one so that you actually see improvement. The riskiest thing about retaking the exam is, of course, doing worse on your second exam. So not only would that look poorly, like if you had an okay score, but you retake it and you do worse, that's probably like the worst case scenario and is not uncommon. And so be wary of that if you're considering retaking. And then with all this, make sure, I want to bring up the concept of mindfulness, and that's just kind of bringing attention to what's occurring in the moment without any judgment. So like not saying, oh, I should be doing this, I should be studying, I should be taking a practice exam. Kind of just take a second to stop, breathe, and kind of be happy, or kind of think about the good that's going on around you. Kind of hone in, even if it's a small thing like, oh, you got a fun text from your friend the other day, or you had a really good meal for lunch. Things like that, just kind of hone in on that and make sure you're in a positive mindset as you're going through the MCAT exam and through your preparation. And there's lots of apps that can help you with this. Some are free, some are paid, like Calm, Headspace, and there's lots of YouTube videos that are like guided meditations and things like that. So even if you've never done it before, I definitely recommend it. Give it a try. It can really help you out. And so at this point, there's the QR code there and the sign-in form there. But do y'all have any questions or want tips specifically for like your preparation or anything like that? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or just type it in the chat and we can talk about it. Yeah, for the resource Google Doc, I'll be sending that out to all of you individually through email. And then I'll also be having the other officers send it out in an email.
I had a quick question about the mindfulness apps. What does Headspace do, or Calm?
Yeah, so these apps, they usually have different functions depending on whatever they kind of have as their unique feature. But a lot of them commonly have things like a guided meditation. So they'll play like Zen music and it'll guide you and help you kind of relax, be clearing your mind, and help you like get a refreshing, have a refreshing state of mind so that you can kind of be ready to tackle the day. I think they also sometimes have journals where you can kind of do like a gratitude journal and write down things that you're grateful for, and that can kind of also help you get in a good headspace.
Awesome, thanks.
Lauren, when did you start studying for the MCAT? Like what year and how many months before their exam. So for me, I took my exam in January of my junior year. So that's in the spring. I started studying, super light studying in the summer after my sophomore year. And so by super light, I would kind of just read through a content review book that I got from Kaplan. And I'd do that really lightly, nothing like that study schedule you saw at the beginning. And so that was, guess that's 6, 7 months out. But like I mentioned, nothing really heavy. And, following my recommendation, I'd say really kind of narrowed down the timeline of when you're actually doing super intense studying. And so throughout the summer, I studied lightly. I did Jack Weston essentially every day, or every day that I could. If I missed a day, just went back and caught back up. After that, during the fall semester, I found it was actually really difficult to balance MCAT studying with courses. And so be conscious of that as you're kind of planning when you want to take your MCAT and things like that. So I didn't really do too much during the fall semester, but I kept up with things like Jack Weston. I continued to do like light review with the content books, but not too much. But then around November, December, and the rest of January, I really started doing the intense studying. And so that gave me about 2.5 months before my MCAT exam to do content review, practice, and things like that. And I can get into more detail if you want, but that was kind of the gist of my timeline. And if you want more details, just let me know. Awesome. By a show of hands, who's taking the MCAT really soon? Anybody?
Like, would May count or June? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe like in the spring.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Joyce? Gotcha. Yeah, I can definitely send you all the PowerPoint. It's going to be included with the resources document. Oh, one other thing is that a lot of the material you'll see on the MCAT resources was made by the medical mentors, or pre-health mentors as they're called now. I'm part of that, and so I helped to make it. But the pre-health mentors are also holding the MCAT workshop series, and so I'm not sure if I should be advertising that here, but it is going to be happening next week and the next 5 weeks after that. And so if you're really interested in getting a lot of good MCAT information and perspectives from several other mentors as well, that will be occurring next week. And you can email me for more information.
Sean, would you be able to put your email in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any burning thoughts? Awesome. So again, feel free to hit that QR code, fill out the form. You're good to go. I'll be here for a while if you have any questions. Take your time.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah. Also, feel free to private chat me if you prefer, and we can talk about that as well.
Oh, I'm
Cool.
still here. I had no idea when to like actually say something.
No, you're good. You're good.
That's okay.
So I'm sorry. But thank you. I'm not going to be taking the MCAT, but I was so interested during the whole entire time. I was like, whoa, that's so cool. So thanks.
Yeah, but no problem. I think the next time we have a workshop, I'll just be sure to tell you exactly when. And then we'll
Because I was like, I don't
yeah.
know when. And
Sorry
I was
about that.
No,
Good.
Thank you
it's
so
also
much, both of you, though.
Thanks for coming.
thank you. Also, my bad. I was like, oh,
Okay.
that's the
Oh,
end.
you're
I
fine.
didn't
I was
get
just like,
Yeah, I didn't give you a chance to talk. So yeah.
that was fine. All right, bye guys. Have a great
Bye.
night.
Have a good day. Awesome. Okay, I'll stop the recording.